Hey guys, it's Sam, and yet again I have let my recent reads pile up, and I have quite a lot of them today, so I'm going to try to rapid fire this as much as possible. Also, a lot of these books I've talked about in other videos, so I'll link those. But right now I'm feeling very overwhelmed on if I'll have like a 35 to 40 minute video about recent reads, so I don't want to do that. So let's get into it. First is The Dollmakers by Lynn Buchanan. This is the first book in what will be a series of interconnected standalones in this world, it sounds like. In this one, we follow our main character of Sheen, and she is a doll maker. And in this world, it's a fantasy world, and there are these kind of like demon-like creatures called the Shad that they have for many years used dolls to fight. So dolls can either be like guard dolls, or they can be like artisan, beautiful, sort of like toys and things. And to become a doll maker officially, you have to apprentice for a while and then take this test in which you are sorted into one of the two categories. And Sheen is from a family that was killed in one of the big attacks of the Shad years ago. And so her whole life has been about being a doll maker, and specifically a guard doll maker. But when her test comes around, she is sorted into artisan, and she cannot handle that. So she ends up running off trying to challenge a different doll maker in a city to prove that she should actually be a guard doll maker, and chaos ensues from there. I loved this. I talked about this in my like mid-year freakout tag and things, that this was so unexpected. The world is so interesting and just different, and it just has like a different flavor than what I've seen in a while. I really liked that our main character is awful, and she grows in ways that are realistic. She does things that are realistic. Like, you want to shake her, and then she grows and learns a lot. You also don't just follow her perspective. There's perspectives of other people around. So like her teacher, some of the other doll makers, things like that. And so you get a lot of other people's perspectives as well. And yeah, the way that this is also set up, just this overall world, is really cool and very interconnected. If you enjoy like the Cosmere style of a lot of different places kind of tying together, but you want it on a less grand epic scale, I think that's what this is going to be. So I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the world, I enjoyed the plot, I enjoyed everything about it. So yeah, if you want something a little bit interesting that not a lot of people are talking about, I would definitely give this a shot. 5 out of 5 stars from me. Then I reread The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri. This is the second book in the Burning Kingdom series and continues to be a favorite. I'm just rereading these in order to get to the Lotus Empire. I just wanted to refresh everything, and I just continue to love these characters. Again, very flawed people, and just like seeing what war does, and a lot of like religion and religious fervor and things. So this has so many elements that I really enjoy, but I've talked about this book before. I continue to love it. Like I said, this was a reread. 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Leviathan Falls by James S.A. Corey, which is the final book in the Expanse series. I've been talking about these books as I've been reading them like this whole series, and this is one that like, I don't know. There are parts about the ending that I really enjoyed. This is like a 10-book series. I can't go into all the details about the plot and things, but it was a satisfying wrap-up, and I think the wrap-ups of the characters were really satisfying. But by the end, the actual plot stuff felt pretty boring. I think there was a lot more potential for this to be way more expansive than it actually was. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of my feelings of Game of Thrones, which is very funny because I did compare this to Game of Thrones in space in a lot of ways, where you have this, like, in this case, this big sci-fi alien mystery thing, but we're talking a lot about the politics of the people all the time. And the same thing kind of with like the Game of Thrones TV show and the White Walkers, where you're like, I want that to be more of a thing, or at least I did. And then it just kind of isn't. It's still just about like people. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I like that too. I just feel like the big fantastical stuff should have been more of an element. That's kind of how I feel here. Like, yes, that got wrapped up, but in a way that just like didn't really feel necessarily very satisfying. But the people stuff was good. I just wish this was more sci-fi. It's very, and it is like space opera and stuff, but it's very political machinations-y, the entire series. And I was waiting for it to kind of move away from that, or that be something where it's like, we're being distracted by the politics, and when really there's this thing, and it's like, not really. It was really about like, are humans the monsters after all? Which is just a plot that we've seen a lot. So this was fine. I gave this 3 stars. I think overall as a series, the series is way stronger in the first like 3 to 4 books, and then it just kind of keeps going. I went for 10 books. So yeah, like it's between a 3 and a 4-star series for me. I wouldn't say don't read it, but I said this in my last review of the books in the series, I am thinking that the show is better. I am. So we'll see how I continue to feel as I continue to watch the show. I think I'm on just started season 3, I want to say. So we'll see. But anyway, finished the Expanse series. Then we have another book that really surprised me, and that was Monsoon Rising by Tia Guzman. This is the second book in the, I forget what the first one is even called, Hurricane Wars? I think it's just the Hurricane Wars series. And this is definitely a romantasy, but I would say for me that the romance plays into the plot in a way that is actually satisfying and not just like, oh, we have this fantasy world and that doesn't matter because it's just a backdrop for romance. Like, I think that, in my opinion, this intertwines in a nice way. You have these two competing types of magic users. One is light, one is dark, that have been at war for a long time, and there's like rebellions and all of these things. And so, and there ends up being like a political alliance that happens in the first book. And so this is like the second. And so obviously I can't talk much about what happens in the second book, but that is kind of the setup of this like enemies to lovers maybe kind of thing. But this book and this series, I think, does the slow burn of it all really well, of like enemies to reluctant allies to kind of friends, but what are we? And things, outside factors kind of keeping them apart in a way that's not annoying. And yeah, there's just like a lot of tension and slow burn, even though sometimes they have these moments of like sort of being together and then they're like, and it all just makes sense to me. And I think that the fantasy stuff, like the magic stuff of having these like light calls to like sort of forces works really well. It reminds me of sort of like a Darkling and Alina kind of situation, but not that toxic because the Darkling's like actually a villain. This guy is a little bit more like war makes monsters of us all kind of thing, and he's been led astray in many ways and all that. Anyway, I can go into a lot more detail on this. If you want a full review on this, I could probably do that. But I ended up really loving this. I give this 4.5 out of 5 stars. The first book, I think, was a little bit more shaky for me, I want to say. Maybe it was like a 4, though. I don't know. I'm enjoying this series way more than I thought I was going to. So, yeah, I've actually been liking this. For romantasies, something like this. I do enjoy this. This balances everything really well, in my opinion. Next, we have Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab, the toxic lesbian vampire book. I'm not going to go into much detail about this because this has probably been everywhere and you guys know the plot of this by now. For me, this was just This was just mid. V.E. Schwab for me is either like love it or kind of like mid to hate it. And this is one that was just kind of like, for how long it is, I think she could have done more. There's a video, I will link it down below if I remember, about somebody that did like a whole video essay on this that was basically just talking about how like, hey, you could have done more with this, and why are the women, especially like sapphic women, abusing each other the whole time? And we could have used this as like a step away from some of that. Yeah, anyway, pretty much the same critiques I have. Was it beautiful in many ways? Like, was the prose good? Yeah. I just kind of feel like it meandered way too much for what it was doing. Like, it wasn't doing anything different or interesting. And yeah, at this point I've already I've forgotten the characters' names pretty much. I mean, if I sit here and think about it, I remember, but like, it wasn't anything new and not that everything has to be something new. I love a good vampire book, but this just didn't like hit in the way that I was hoping that it would. And again, I'm always flipping a coin when I'm reading a V.E. Schwab book, so this was just a solid 3 stars. Then I read The Will to Battle by Ada Palmer. This is the 3rd book in the Terra Ignota series, which I've explained before is a adult sci-fi series that is incredibly weird. It is essentially just a series of conversations, heavily political, taking place in a future world in which there are no families, there are no nations, there are Bashes, which are like chosen families, and there are, I want to say caste, but that's not right. It's basically like chosen nations based on values. And for many, many years, I think it was like 300 or 500 years, there was like no wars because they had worked everything out politically to make that not happen. And then now all of that is falling apart. There also was a level of like, there wasn't any gender, but then some people are subverting and doing gender. And then there's not supposed to be religion, but there's a lot of religious questions and what is a god and all of that. So there's just a lot of like philosophical conversations in this sci-fi world that is such a unique undertaking that you can't quite explain to people about what it is, because unlike anything that I've ever read, and even though sometimes I'm like, am I connected to the characters necessarily? No. But am I connected to the project that this is and the undertaking that this is and the creativity that this demands of the author? Yes. So yeah, we'll see how I feel when we get to the end. But yeah, also unreliable narrator. Most of the people in this are bad people. There's no real bad and good, and many a philosophical question. So yeah, I quite enjoyed this. 4 out of 5 stars. Then I did a little reading vlog challenge where I was catching up with a bunch of books in my physical TBR because, spoiler alert, I'm very behind on that. So I will link that on the screen where I go into more detail about some of these books. I'm just kind of going to do a rapid fire because I talked about a lot of those books there. I mean, this whole thing's supposed to be rapid fire, but we're already at 12 minutes of recording time. So it's not rapid enough. So yeah, because I talked about that in that reading vlog, which features a lot of footage of my cat as well as my fish, who is not dead. If you are wondering why I even said that, go and watch that video. But first I read The Dead Cattail Assassins by P. Jelly Clark, and this was like a solid 3 stars. It's a little novella about assassins who are basically brought back to life in this like contract, so they're kind of like undead, and our main character gets a contract for someone that she knows. Like somehow she knows this girl that she has a contract for. She doesn't know how she like knows her, but she remembers. But you're not supposed to remember anything from your past life, so that complicates things. This was fine. I would say that the writing, I really like P.J. Jelly Clark's like other sort of like Cairo series. But this was just like the writing was a little bit too tongue-in-cheek in some ways, where like it was using too much modern language for this fantasy setting. Like at one point, and I talked about this in the vlog, but they use a whole thing about like edgelords, and I'm like, and they do it to be funny about like, oh, they call themselves the edgelords, and I'm like, no, like it didn't really land for me. Like some of the modern turns of phrase here that felt a little like satirical just like didn't hit for me. So this was like 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine, kind of forgettable for me. Then we have The Rainfall Market by Yu Young Gwang, I think is how you pronounce it, but this is a translated work. This originally was, I believe, Korean. I'm not seeing on here where exactly this was from. But this is translated, so I'm giving it, this will play in, but this is following main character of Saren, and she is like kind of miserable in her life, and she wants to go to the Rainfall Market, which is this market with like essentially goblin type creatures that apparently just like randomly arrives, and if you go, you can trade in your misfortune for like a new life. When you hear that premise, what do you think is going to happen? You're probably right. So the whole thing is that I think that the like writing and the story and the plot did not make up for the fact that this felt like so, again, like nothing new. I kind of knew it was going to happen the whole time. There was no like mystery to that. And the theme, like that theme is good of like, okay, like, you know, your life is your life and everyone has bad things and ultimately you would still want your misfortune, blah, 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 whatever. We've seen that before, right? But this didn't do anything different with that. It didn't do anything different with that theme. And the prose also wasn't anything like to write home about. Now, I have heard, and I hear this a lot with translated work, that in the original language, it's so much better, right? I do not speak the original language though. So this happens a lot with translations where it just feels like some of the like lyricism and prose and stuff just gets lost in translation. So this was just, I found myself getting a little bit annoyed by things and by it feeling very two-dimensional. So I gave this a 2.5 out of 5 stars. It probably is better in the original language. I can't read it that way though. And this was not, I wanted it to be better than it was because I think there was potential there, but it just didn't really hit. Then I read The Butcher of the Forest by Premu Muhammad. This is another novella, and this is following a character who's being called by the local tyrant, who's called kind of the butcher, because his children have gone missing in this magical woods, and she is the only person that has gone into this forest and come out and survived, and she's also retrieved a child from there before, many, many years ago. So she's having to go back in, kind of remember all the things that happened back then, remember all of the, and this is kind of like, you know, like a fae type woods, remembering all the tricks and things, and is she going to make it out and what happened the first time. So I loved this because it has all the kinds of things that I love, you know, magical woods, sentient forest, fae type creatures, mischief, chaos, trauma, all of those things. So yeah, I quite enjoyed this. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I would gladly take a whole novel set around this woods. Then I read A Letter to the Luminous Deep by Sylvie Cathrall. This is a epistolary novel that is just a series, so epistolary being a series of letters between characters, that is following 2 characters in the past who are talking about sort of like scientific things around the ocean. So this is like taking place in a world where we, like humans, live either like sort of on the surface of the water or underwater. And so a lot of the like science and stuff is around the ocean. And so these 2 characters are corresponding in almost like a Regency, like everything is a Regency tone, even though it's sort of like sci-fi fantasy-esque. It's really hard to kind of place this genre exactly. So you have those 2 characters, and then you have 2 characters kind of in the future who are talking about the previous two characters going missing, and then trying to like piece everything together. So they are exchanging some of these letters that their various family members had around like what happened here and trying to piece everything together. This was very slow. So the story and like the setting is really cool because it's like this very different idea. Like when I read it, I was like, is it gonna be mermaids? What is it exactly? And it's sort of like in Regency era science, but that is still more advanced because they're going to like the depths of the ocean and things. But the way of talking and everything is very Regency era. And yeah, it's very unexpected and very weird, but very slow. The epistolary nature of it makes it very slow. I don't tend to love epistolary novels, but I gave this a chance. I would say just like a solid 3. I don't know if I'm going to continue. Like the twist at the end is kind of like maybe, but ultimately I'm just like, I wasn't that gripped by it. But if you do like something different, kind of like underwater story, if you like that kind of Regency era, sort of fantasy of manners, sci-fi of manners, kind of, that's what this is. Then I read The Unmapping by Denise S. Robbins, which is a climate fiction story taking place in New York, where every day New York just gets rearranged at 4 a.m. The buildings just rearrange themselves. And we figure out throughout the story that it's like a climate disaster situation of why that's happening. But this is ultimately a story that's not about the mystery of why that's happening or explaining the science behind why that's happening. This is about the everyday people and like how they are handling it. So we primarily follow 2 characters who work for, I think it's like an emergency response team that has an actual name, but I'm forgetting what it is. But those are our 2 main characters, but then we also get snippets from other characters that those characters interact with and just like how people are responding to this kind of like climate apocalyptic event. So it's in the same vein as like a How High We Go in the Dark or the Station 11 kind of thing of like what happens post-apocalypse, except for this is like kind of during this like sort of climate apocalyptic event, and more about how people respond and all of that. So I would say very character driven. I quite enjoyed this. I would say it was a 4 for most of it, and then the very end really dragged in a way that did kind of bring the story down. Like I think the pacing of some things got thrown off at the very end and could have wrapped up sooner, but that took it down to like a 3.5. But ultimately, if you enjoy kind of that climate fiction stuff, that like climate post-apocalyptic-y type story, and this saying something about that and how about people and like flawed people, I think you'd enjoy this. I listened to the audiobook. Highly recommend that. I think it works really well on audio. Then read Wealth Witchery by Pamela Chen. This is a speaker that I saw at Mystic South. I'm not going to talk about this much here, but I did really enjoy this book, like a 4 out of 5 stars, tabbed it up a lot. It's about like financial witchcraft and things like that. I really liked the way that she talked about stuff. I will talk about this more, like I do all of my witchy stuff, on my bindery though, which is linked down below if you are interested. I then read The Ornithologist Field Guide to Love, which by India Holton, which is another sort of like Regency fantasy of manners story that's following some ornithologists who are like magical bird keepers, bird watchers, whatever, bird scientists. The Ornithological Society has sort of posed a challenge to track down this one particular really rare bird. And so our main characters are sort of rival scientists, and they're having to be sort of unlikely allies and team up in this thing. This is just very cute. It's very cute. It's very fun. I highly recommend the audio for this as well because the writing is so over the top. Like the way that people speak, like by Jove, and just like very caricatured, that I think the audio works well. Reading it, I think would have not gone as well for me. But it's very fun and cute and like very much romance heavy. Like everything is sort of pushing them together from a romance angle. But yeah, I enjoyed it. They were cute. I would say 3.75 stars. I think the execution of this is excellent for what it was doing. It just didn't quite resonate enough with me to be a 4. And finally, we have Sunbringer by Hannah Kinnear, which is the second book in the Fallen God series. This is a series that takes place in a fantasy world in which there are gods, like in an animistic way, you know, like everything can have a spirit, have a god, and gods are born out of worship and out of having shrines and things. And so we follow a number of different characters. We follow Kissen, who's a god killer who has a very tragic history with gods. We have Anara, who's the daughter of a woman whose like family was basically wiped out, and she has a god attached attached to her and doesn't really know why that is the case. And then we follow a knight who used to work with the king, who's best friends with the king, who wiped out all of these gods, because now like gods are being wiped out. So yeah, we follow their stories, and this is just a continuation again of the first book, so I can't talk in depth about it because so many spoilers are cliffhanger endings to these books, but not in a way that I can't deal with. I quite enjoy these. I love our main characters. Each story really kind of like pieces out their flaws while still really having you pull for them. The world of that sort of like animist own world mythology, I love. I love the use of gods and the shrines and the belief and all of that. Like that discussion of gods I really enjoy. And I think the plot really works as well. So yeah, I quite enjoyed this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This is one of my favorite series that I'm currently reading. All right, 25 minutes. I think I did pretty well of actual recording times. Also a couple admin things. I'm talking more in depth on my bindery about digital gardening and personal curriculums and things like that. So I might post a video here about that as well. But if you're interested in that, there's more content there about that, as well as the witchcraft stuff. Also, if you missed it, BookNet Fest is expanding to now include BookNet Rest, which is a reading retreat that is happening in October, the end of October in New Orleans for a weekend. And everything about that is posted. So if you'd like to join us for a cozier event all about reading, we're going to have a book club. We're going to maybe do something like tarot readings. It's going to be in the Garden District of New Orleans. So if you want a quieter event, I think at max we can have like 16 people. So it's going to be between probably like 9 and 16 people. I will have all the information for that link down below for BookNet Rest if you want to join us for the reading retreat. Comment below, let me know what you have been reading recently. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.